A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You would better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" This is a perturbing part of the end of Matthew's Gospel, quite aside from the rather surreal world in which the bridegroom arrives for the wedding party at midnight, a midnight at which it is still possible to go to a shop and buy oil for your lamp. Rather more perturbing is something which suggests that there could be a circumstance when God says to one of God's children, "I don't know you." But the door is shut. Although we should note, we don't know who shut the door. Nothing in that reading says that it was actually the bridegroom himself who shut the door. But for all of that, this passage is, without any doubt, a very challenging passage. It's also a reminder to us of God's call to us to be active in mission and aware of the presence of God in how we live our lives and how we deal with the world around us. God calls us through the church to participate in God's mission to the entire world, a mission that should make the world more and not less Christ-like. But we are given freedom to respond to God's invitation. Some of the bridesmaids exercise their freedom by not preparing, and that can have consequences. All our choices have consequences because God gives us the freedom to do things which do not build up society and participate in mission. As I record this nation is pretty seriously split, with approximately a third of the inhabitants of the US not being vaccinated, the other 2/3 being vaccinated. And we are seeing the consequences of this as they play out across the life of this nation. And while for some, but not many of the unvaccinated, there are clear, pressing medical reasons why that may be the case, for many it has become a political choice. And we have that freedom. But God calls us to use our freedom productively to work with God, to make the world more Christ-like and not less. And how we choose to live out our choices has consequences, as the foolish virgins discover. I find it very hard to imagine a God saying of any one of God's children, "I do not know you." But it may be hard to recognize us through a closed door if our actions are so radically un-Christ-like. And it may well be that it's not God closing the door, but in effect us closing the door ourselves, putting our fingers in our ears, turning our back on God and what God says to us, because that's what sin does with us fallen humans, despite God's call and God's love. So as we hear these challenging words of Jesus in this very disconcerting parable, let's make sure that we hear the call of the bridegroom, that we are constantly aware, not that the bridegroom will come, but that the bridegroom has already come, and there are consequences for that. And whatever our thoughts about the second coming and a final judgment, let's live our lives now, aware of God's presence in the world, aware of the face of Christ in that of all those whom we encounter around us as our neighbours near and far. And let's make sure we are dressed and ready for Christ-like action to change the world. Amen.